Hello everyone, Mocha Bear here. Welcome back to Mocha Bear's Hobby Den. Today is a very special episode as we will be skimming the waters of an upcoming resource book by Matthew Yarrow and Seamus Williams of Homebrewed Games. Shall we get started? And for those of you wondering who's Matthew Yarrow, who's Seamus Williams, what is Homebrewed Games? Well, they are the ones responsible for this project, Druids, Secret of the Primal Circle. If you've been following me long enough, you saw that I did an unboxing and overview video of this project. Link to that will be in the description box down below, and here is the thumbnail you will be looking for. There were a lot of things I loved about this book. If you've been following me long enough, you know I love good artwork. This has great artwork in it. Some of it even created by Matthew Yarrow himself. This being one of them, Kabalash, the Hand of Death. But it also gave us just some deep lore for the Druid class in general. It gave us subclasses. So we got more circles for the Druid. We got a new Druid class called the Dire Druid. New spells, new creatures. It gave us everything that I love as a D&D player. So I am here to talk about their next upcoming project. And the project is called Guardians of Secret and Shadow. This will be a 5e resource introducing new things, including new subclasses and new classes. We do have some artwork that I will be able to show you, as well as some information on these new things that will be introduced. So here I have a small table of contents provided to me by Matthew Yarrow. It's giving me permission to show you all this. Please bear with me because there are a lot of notes and information that I've been given and I'm going to be going through. And before I get into this more, one thing Matt and I agreed on is one big thing that is lacking from 5e is lore on classes and subclasses. This book, this project, is going to be giving us exactly that. It's going to be giving us lore on some of these classes that are going to be showing up. First up, we have the Barbarian. The Barbarian will be getting a subclass called the Bloodsworn. They were described to me like a dedicated champion with a little bit of magic. At higher levels, they have a glyph that transfers to another person that the Barbarian has sworn a blood oath to. This glyph not only will offer protection to the Barbarian, but when they make this blood oath, the glyph will actually transfer to the other person, and the glyph will grant the receiver some benefits. Before we go any further, none of this is set in stone. All this information that I'm showing you today is subject to change. This is like early stage right here that I am showing you. The Bloodsworn was themed around the samurai. So they make an oath, and if they fail their oath, they become wanderers. They become, I believe you refer to them as shamed, and their glyph turns from a mark of honor to a mark of shame. And so while they are without a purpose, because their purpose is to fulfill an oath, they must wander around trying to find a new purpose, a way to bring back honor to themselves, which I thought was really, really cool. So next up we have the Cleric. The Cleric is getting a new domain called Keepers of the Dead. It is an order of clerics pursuing the undead. Their purpose is tracking, hunting, and destroying the undead. To quote Matt, they become so consumed with undead that they begin to walk a very fine line between being mortal and venturing into the shadowy realm of the undead. End quote. The Keepers of the Dead will be a themed order. In fact, let me bring this up for you. This is a preliminary of the cover itself. And pictured here on the cover is the Grand Inquisitor of the Keepers of the Dead sitting in his chair half rotting. And he's surrounded by a swarm of zombies of the undead behind him. My players know that I am a big fan of using undead creatures. So when I found out that this was going to be the cover and this is a theme for the Cleric, I fell in love with it right away. That is so cool looking. So next up we have the Druid alternative subclasses. The Druid will be getting some updates from this book. Matt said that they'll be focusing more on the primal powers that are mentioned in the book. They'll be showing up more in here. He also said that an updated version of the book, the PDF, will be available by the time the project goes live, or it should be. And those of you wondering what a primal power is, it is something that I briefly mentioned in the overview of this book. It is something that can replace the Druids' wild shape if they wish. So other than wild shaping into a beast, they're able to take on these other powers provided to them, such as a staff, or allowing them to gain different features and abilities temporarily. And then the art piece that he sent me for this is the Druid from the cover of the book here, which I still absolutely love. I love the wolf just standing there in the background watching. So the fighter will also be getting some work done. They'll be getting a thing called martial action, which will provide things like parry, charge, lethal blow, for example, to give the fighter a better action economy. To quote Matt, this will be able to make fighting more of a dance and less rolling the dice and hit somebody. They'll be able to do a dirty action where they try to blind the person either with like their cape or maybe throwing a handful of gravel in their face. This will give the fighter more fun and imaginative action economy, in my opinion. I think that's something really cool. Because fighters, like Matt told me, most people find fighters to be the easier class to use because they have less working components, which for basic fighters, yeah, they have the least moving components. They're easier to understand, less things to really keep track of. One thing that I feel most people lack on is a fun action economy for the fighters, and I feel like the martial action feature will be a cool addition. There will be new things covering the champion and rune knight, but we'll also introduce a new subclass, which I'm excited for, called the Dragon Banners. Those of you who are fans of theming your characters around dragons, and when Fizban's book came out and only the monk and ranger got something, well, fighters, now you get one as well. There will be gobs of lore for this subclass. They are knights aligned to different dragons, similar to Eldritch Knight, but without spells. Instead, they gain abilities based on the dragon they align themselves with. So for example, if they align themselves with a red dragon, a fire-breathing dragon, they will gain resistance to fire damage, and they'll also gain the ability to ignite their blades with flame. So I'm guessing that means they'll be able to deal fire damage on top of the regular damage that their weapon deals. But we'll see what happens with that when it officially comes out. Next up, we have the Paladin. The Paladins will be getting a new subclass called Oath of the Keepers, but they're also known as Reaver. These are paladins who can potentially become undead killing machines due to their dabblings in powers involving the undead. Things that are very dark and taboo, that is very dangerous. So next up is Rangers, and we have an art piece for that. Rangers will be getting an alternative class. To quote Matt again, "Well, to me, the Ranger was always more of a skill-based person, an expert," end quote. This alternative class would completely get rid of their ability for druidic magic, thus making them more of a cross between fighter and a rogue. It focuses more on the Ranger's abilities to track, ambush, and lure enemies and creatures into traps/ambushes. So the first subclass for the Ranger that we discussed in this upcoming project is called the Banner of Witherthume. This is a subclass that focuses more on archery. Witherthume was a dragon from one of Matt's older campaigns. These rangers harness the power of Witherthume into their attacks, thus gaining more power and or range, things like that, to their shots, dealing potentially more damage. The next we talked about is the Green Ranger. The Green Ranger almost made it into this book, but it did not, sadly, but it's okay, it's making its way here. This Ranger was described to me as becoming more in tuned with plant life and gains aspects of plant life. So we'll probably be seeing more features that allow them to blend in better with their environment when in the wild trying to stealth or hunt, things like that. Who knows, maybe even meld into nature or something like that might be a feature. That'd be cool. Kind of like what Rambo did in First Blood Part 2 when he was being tracked and was hiding in the mud wall. That'd be a cool thing to have. The next ones were the Slayer. which is more of a hunter subclass, and stalker, which is more of a beastmaster subclass. But they're based on the expert version and less on the magic. Oh, and another thing about the art piece that you see here, that symbol in the bottom right corner, that is called the Mark of the Black Arrow. The Black Arrow is a unspoken order of rangers. So you can see the ranger himself also has it on his left shoulder on his armor. It's a way to identify themselves to each other. And I thought that was pretty cool to get a ranger order in here. Another thing that was mentioned to me, two more things, was that the rangers will be getting a feature, and rather than me trying to read my notes about it, I was actually given the thing for it right here. So here is the alternative options for running a ranger. You get proficiency, expertise bonus optional, tools of the trade optional. Here's ambush attack, far traveler. But here's the thing I wanted to talk about that we talked about in our meeting. Hunter sign. You have learned Hunter sign, a language of hand gestures that allows you to communicate silently with others who can see you. It takes much longer to convey a message using Hunter sign than it does to speak the same message plainly. Hunter sign is most frequently used while hunting and in combat situations where silence could be a tactical advantage. Simple concepts of numbers of creatures, creature types, strengths, positions, which to target to engage first, and where allies should move are what is frequently communicated. Other more complex concepts are difficult, if not impossible, to communicate, such as the history of a relic. A creature that does not understand Hunter sign must make a DC 14 survival wisdom check to understand what is being communicated. On a failed check, they either don't understand what is being communicated or misunderstand it. That was something that I thought is very cool. I've been trying to work on sign language in general because it's a useful skill in real life, but it's also something that me and one of my players were talking about trying to work on. So, because that's a language that her character would want to be able to use, and I thought it'd be cool to have NPCs in my world that are deaf, are mute, or know sign language, and are able to communicate with each other to prevent other people who don't know it knowing what they're talking about. So having this as an actual thing in the game is pretty cool. I know that Drow had a sign language, Drow sign language, in one of the older editions, and it doesn't exist in 5e that I've seen. But to have this show up is really cool. And I do intend on doing a more in-depth run-through of the Ranger alternatives that we're given here. There's some other things that I've been given that I want to do a more in-depth thing over, but I don't want to make this video too long, so those will have to be done in separate videos with Matt's blessing. And another thing that was mentioned when we talked about the Ranger is a new tool that's being introduced called Hunter's Tools. This would include things to build lures, traps like snares, and more. Things that a hunter or a pathfinder would implement that they would benefit from. So next up, we've got the rogue subclass called School of Bells. This was described to me as a subclass that focuses more on being a thief. There's more flavor based on where you got your skills from and what group or guild or organization you belong to and how they all interact with each other. Next up, we have one of the two new classes being introduced called the Runeblade. The Runeblade is a new class with limited spellcasting like the Paladin and Ranger. It's described as a mix between a fighter and a wizard. And yes, before anyone says anything, came to my mind immediately, the wizard has a subclass called Bladesinger. It is a very heavy fighter wizard, and it is one of the most fun subclasses I have ever played. However, the difference is that, like I said, they have limited spellcasting, and it was described to me as, quoting Matt here, chaotic champions of various gods, and they're very much along the lines of the Highlander, where there can only be one. So they will actually track down each other, challenge each other to a fight, just to prove who is the better champion, as well as who is the better god. I thought that was so cool. He said that for this class, magic is more combat oriented. So Bladesingers do have some good combat oriented spells, but this is supposed to be focusing more on that specifically. And if you've seen the Highlander films, maybe even the show, I have not seen the show, you understand the concept. It is a cool concept. So I'm curious to see how that works out. Next up is the Sage. The Sage is another new class being added. To quote Matt again, is all about exploration and expertise. So this will fit the role of a wise advice giver for both in and out of combat. So out of combat, they are someone who'd be able to give you information on something. They would have a good knowledge about it to help you understand this thing. In combat, that thing could be a creature or a magic weapon, an item, something like that. For the creature, they can give you advice on how to better target the enemy, how to better hurt them, best way to lure them out. For items, the best way to exploit their abilities and functions in combat. The way that he described this class to me, I personally, instantly in my head thought of, this sounds like Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender. At least that was the vibe I was getting from his description, and instantly sounds like a really fun character. He said that this class touches something that the wizard lacks on, because the wizard always just has magic at their disposal to help them out of situations, whereas the sage, they require their knowledge and expertise to be able to work their way out of it, or to help someone work their way out of it, rather than just calling on an arcane ability. I do have the template for the sage as well, which again, I like the ranger, I want to do a separate video on, because there are 16 pages for this thing. So that needs to be a whole separate video. Next up for the wizards, we talked about the new feature for familiars. It'll be unique themed. Let me bring that up here, because I believe this is only 4 pages. So says right here, not final draft. You've got the find familiar alternative. Long story short, same spell. However, your familiar is based on your school of magic, your arcane tradition. So for a Fey familiar, your Fey familiar is a standard familiar as described in the spell, and is a celestial, Fey, or fiend. It gives you some additional things they can do, which I will do a more in-depth review on this as well in a separate video. But for Fey familiar, you a school of abjuration, conjuration, and divination, you get a Fey familiar. The Eldritch familiar you get for enchantment, evocation, and necromancy, then as well as transmutation. I thought that was so cool. When he described to me the necromancy familiar, it'd be like one of the descriptions was like an undead cat. That is a cool concept. But of course, this is optional. You don't have to go with this. You could always go with the standard way of the spell and having your familiar appear differently. So again, I will do a separate video in more depth on that. Here we'll talk about the spell foci. It was briefly described as, well, let me tell you all, those who don't know about D&D and spell casting, some spells require a physical component to cast a spell. For Fireball, the most well-known spell for any RPG, the spell component for it is a small ball of guano and sulfur. So what they plan to do is introduce special or more powerful components for these spells, and these can increase the damage, the spell save DC, etc. for these spells. I thought that was a cool concept. I've thought about trying that out before. Now I'm definitely gonna have to try it out when this comes out. So next up, we've got multi-classing. So they'll be doing some new rules for that as well. Excuse me. Need to adjust myself here. I'm sitting here for so long. They have rules, suggestions that they implement in the book, saying that you have to keep the classes, the 2 classes, within 4 levels of each other. Because, and I agree with I agree with this statement, that doing a 1 level dip in multiple classes can cause problems. Can sometimes make a character OP and break the game. I've had someone do that. Sadly, they multi-classed into like 4 or 5 different classes, and it was very confusing for them, and they're the ones who made the character, so you can only imagine how confused I got at times. I'm never letting anyone multi-class into more than 3 classes maximum. But they also suggest picking one subclass just because of the utility from the second class you pick could make the game broken and the character OP. But another thing that they're introducing is multi-class subclasses, which I was like, excuse me? Here on the table of contents that I was provided, it has 8 in there. So I'm guessing that there will, at the moment of recording this, that there are 8 that they have in mind for this book. So these are subclasses dedicated to specific multi-class combos. The first example you see there is Blood Beast, which is a barbarian druid. If you want to take a specific multi-class subclass, it will have listed what 2 classes are required for it, and you have to take those 2 classes. You also have to forego the subclasses from both base classes. And at first I was like, does that mean that something's gonna replace that? And I was told that the Blood Beast, for example, becomes your subclass, and it uses the combined levels of both classes to reach level 20, where you will get an actual capstone, which I thought was really cool, that you actually are working towards something for a level 20, where most multi-classing, you don't really get anything at the end unless you happen to level up one of the classes and land on another feature. He said that doing this is like creating a whole new class. It's giving you new fundamentals and strategies to use. The Blood Beast is a, quote, martial wild shaper like Bjorn from The Hobbit, end quote. And I was like, yo, that's awesome. So you can rage and then wild shape. And while you're wild shaped, you gain the benefit of extra damage and damage resistance from your rage, but you also gain the wild shape's HP, and some of those give you like 100 something HP. That's technically temporary, because once that HP of your wild shape is gone, you return to your normal form and you still have your HP to work on. And I thought that was really cool. I might have to try that out just with like a regular multi-class thing until this comes out, so I can try out the official Blood Beast. But here you also see the Scald, which I was told is a thing in Pathfinder. I am very new to Pathfinder. I have yet to actually play a game. I've only ever made a character, and I'm still learning. But that is a cross between the Barbarian and the Bard. The Wandering Wizard, which is a Druid wizard, and the Death Mask, which is a Monk rogue. Now, I was given a thing for the Wandering Wizard, and this is also 4 pages long, which I will do another video on later on. I'm probably going to be doing these videos one after the other so we can get this out to you all, because as you can see here, it says not final draft. So these are gonna most likely be altered and changed multiple times until the book comes out. And so here we've got skills and tools. The book's gonna have suggestion of enhancements for skills and tools. We are getting a new skill called Artisan. And the concept is under every skill, there's a list of tools that belong to that skill. So if you have proficiency in the skill, you should have proficiency in the tool. Tools will be passive. So for example, was given if you don't have proficiency in stealth, and yet you have silent boots, like boots of stealth, then you will get a bonus to your stealth check as long as it pertains to moving silently, as the boots are made of a soft leather, making your footsteps quieter. So you'll get a better stealth check for moving quietly as long as that's a valid thing in the situation, but it won't help you if you're trying to avoid being seen. And then to touch on the expansions, for example, I was given Investigation. Investigation is typically used for being more deductive and looking for clues, but it's also meant for hard science and non-magical things. Examples were looking at architecture, engineering, mechanics, chemistry, and physics. Anything involving those, you would want to use investigation because it's based on intelligence. For tools, we already talked about Hunter's tools, but spells, they will be introducing some new spells. Here's a list of some of those spells that will be added. Some of the spells will be there to support the new classes or subclasses. Last thing that was brought up, as you can see, is piecemeal armor. So the concept is that, say your character gets hit with a natural 20 from the enemy, or you land a natural 20 on an attack against an enemy that's wearing armor. The natural 20, some DMs will say, okay, that's going to deal damage to your armor, thus rendering it ineffective depending on where it's hit. And piecemeal will have you being able to pretty much scavenge armor. So say that an arm piece or a leg piece of armor got damaged, and you just fought a bunch of guards or bandits, and you look at them and you find one whose armor is still usable, there's a piece of it, you're like, hey, DM, I want to take that piece of their armor and add it to my own, then you'd be able to do that. I believe the book is supposed to have like some guidelines on how to determine the AC, strength requirements, or the dexterity bonuses, boosts, or penalties that they may take. But that is everything that was sent to me so far. I'm super excited. Matt, thank you so much for having that meeting with me to present all this to me, for me to be able to present it to my viewers. Again, I know I'm beyond super excited for this. I know that there are some of my followers, my subscribers, who are beyond excited for this, and we cannot wait to get our hands on the book. I cannot wait for this project to go live. Definitely backing it day one. And again, with Matt's blessing, of course, I plan on doing individual videos for the Ranger alternative, the Sage, the Find Familiar alternative, as well as the Wandering Wizard multi-class subclass. This video is long enough as it is. Those would just make it even longer, and I want to be able to take my time and make a video just focusing on those specific things. So if he gives me the green light, I will be doing that, and those will be the next coming up videos. So I'm going to go ahead and end it there for today. Again, Matt, thank you so much for this opportunity. All of my subscribers, thank you for subscribing to my channel. All my viewers, thank you for viewing. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. I recently made the announcement on my social media that I reached 100 subscribers by my 1-year anniversary. Technically true. I was incorrect in the fact that July is actually my 1-year anniversary. Either the 10th or the 11th is 1-year anniversary of my very first official video on this channel. So I have reached over 100 subscribers before my 1-year anniversary. So again, thank you so much to all of you who have made this possible. Please continue to support me, share these videos, and spread awareness of these projects and these hobbies to your friends and family, to anyone who is looking for something to do for a hobby. But let me go ahead and end it there because I will continue on. So as always, please take care of yourselves, and until next time, hobby on.